The Dawn of Civilization, Unearthing the Sumerians. On a scorching afternoon in 1849, while British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard wiped sweat from his brow in the Iraqi desert, his workers unearthed something that would rewrite human history. Beneath 6,000 years of wind-blown sand lay the remains of humanity's first cities. Not the familiar ruins of Egypt or Greece, but something far older and more profound. Here, in the land the Greeks would later call Mesopotamia, a mysterious people called the Sumerians had built towering temples that scraped the sky, invented the written word on clay tablets that still bear their ghostly impressions, and created the first complex urban society in human history. Their story is not just one of mud bricks and pottery shards, but of humanity's first stumbling steps towards civilization, a tale of priest. Kings who claimed to speak with gods, of merchants who invented economics by accident while tracking their beer, and of ordinary people who built something extraordinary between two great rivers that gave them life. From village to empire. The Dawn of Civilization. Around 4,500 BCE, in a small village along the Euphrates, an anonymous genius discovered that wet grain left in storage had fermented into something extraordinary. This happy accident would change the course of human history. The cultivation of barley for beer would drive agricultural innovation, create the first surplus economy, and give birth to the world's first accounting system. In short, humanity's love of beer helped build civilization. In the mysterious Ubaid period, named after the archaeological site where its traces were first found, villages began to sprout along the riverbanks like green shoots after rain. The people of this age were innovators by necessity. They developed new types of sickles that could harvest grain more efficiently, experimented with irrigation techniques that could turn desert into farmland, and created sophisticated pottery wheels that could mass-produce containers for storing their growing surplus of food and beer. At the heart of each settlement rose a building unlike any seen before in human history, the temple. These early temples were more than just places of worship. They were the world's first banks, warehouses, and administrative centers. The priests who managed them became humanity's first accountants, keeping track of contributions and distributions with an increasingly complex system of tokens. When these tokens proved too cumbersome, they began pressing them into wet clay, creating impressions that would evolve into the world's first writing system. By 4000 BCE, something unprecedented was happening at a settlement called Uruk. Under the shadow of its massive temple complex, dedicated to the goddess Inanna, Uruk was becoming the world's first true city. Its population swelled to an astonishing 40,000 people, a concentration of humanity unprecedented in history. The city's walls stretched for 6 miles, punctuated by defensive towers that rose nearly 40 feet high. Within those walls, neighborhoods of craftsmen, merchants, and laborers created the first urban society. The rise of Uruk brought with it innovations that would define civilization for millennia to come. The potter's wheel transformed craft production. The invention of the cylinder seal, a small stone cylinder carved with intricate designs that could be rolled across wet clay, created the world's first system of secure identification. Most importantly, the demands of urban administration led to the creation of cuneiform writing. What began as simple pictographs for tracking temple inventory evolved into a sophisticated system capable of recording everything from royal proclamations to love poems. But perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of life in Uruk was invisible to the eye. For the first time in human history, strangers were living together in close proximity, requiring new forms of social organization. The temple bureaucracy expanded into the world's first government, complete with specialized workers, administrators, and an increasingly powerful class of priest kings who claimed divine authority to rule. The success of Uruk inspired imitators. By 3200 BCE, dozens of city-states had emerged across the Sumerian plain, each centered on its own temple complex and ruled by its own priest king. Cities like Ur, Nippur, Lagash, and Kish became powers in their own right, engaging in trade, diplomacy, and occasionally warfare with their neighbors. This new political landscape would set the stage for the Age of Heroes and the rise of the first true kings. One artifact from this period tells us more about life in these early cities than any other: the Uruk vase. Carved from alabaster and standing over 3 feet tall, its intricate relief carvings show us a complete picture of Sumerian urban society. In successive bands, it depicts farmers bringing offerings to the temple, craftsmen at work, priests performing rituals, and at the top, the priest king himself making offerings to Inanna. It is both a work of art and a snapshot of the world's first civilization coming into its full power. As the sun set on the 4th millennium BCE, the stage was set for the next great transformation. The city-states of Sumer had created something entirely new under the sun urban civilization. They had invented writing, developed complex political systems, and created an economic system that would influence all future civilizations. But their greatest challenges and greatest achievements still lay ahead. The Age of Heroes was about to begin, and with it would come the rise of the first true kings and the birth of empire. The Age of Heroes, Sumerian civilization's dawn of kingship and legacy. History remembers him as 2/3 god and 1/3 man, a giant who built the walls of Uruk and journeyed to the ends of the earth in search of immortality. But behind the epic tale of Gilgamesh lay a real king who ruled Uruk around 2750 BCE, when Sumerian civilization was reaching its first magnificent peak. His story, preserved in clay tablets that would survive for over 4,000 years, gives us our first glimpse into the minds and hearts of the people who created civilization. The early dynastic period dawned with blood and glory. The comfortable rule of priest kings gave way to a new breed of leader, warrior kings who claimed their right to rule not through religious authority alone, but through force of arms. Archaeological evidence tells the tale. City walls grew higher, weapons became more sophisticated, and royal tombs began to contain the bodies of servants sacrificed to accompany their masters into the afterlife. At Ur, the legendary Queen Puabi was buried with a splendor that would rival the pharaohs. Her tomb, discovered by archaeologist Leonard Woolley in the 1920s, contained a wealth of gold jewelry, musical instruments, and the remains of 74 attendants who had gone to their deaths in full ceremonial regalia. The mysterious ritual that sent them to their graves remains one of the most haunting aspects of this age, a testament to both the grandeur and the brutality of early kingship. The royal cemetery at Ur also gives us our first glimpse of Sumerian musical culture at its height. A magnificent lyre, its sound box adorned with a gold and lapis lazuli bull's head, lay silent for nearly 5,000 years before its discovery. When modern musicians reconstructed similar instruments, they unlocked the sounds of humanity's first great musical tradition, complex harmonies that would have echoed through temple courtyards during ceremonies that were both religious and political in nature. Warfare between city-states became increasingly sophisticated and ritualized. The Stele of the Vultures, erected by King Eannatum of Lagash around 2460 BCE to commemorate his victory over the rival city of Umma, shows us the world's first phalanx formation, heavily armed infantry moving in tight ranks behind large shields. The detail is extraordinary. We can see the equipment of individual soldiers, the tactical formations they used, and even the vultures that gave the monument its modern name, carrying away the souls of the fallen. But it was Gilgamesh who would come to symbolize this age of larger-than-life rulers. The epic that bears his name is more than just a story. It's our first glimpse into the human heart, grappling with questions of mortality, friendship, and the meaning of life. In the tale, Gilgamesh begins as a tyrannical king who exhausts his people, building massive walls around Uruk. The gods create a wild man, Enkidu, to challenge him. After an epic wrestling match, the two become friends and embark on adventures that would inspire stories for millennia to come. When Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh faces the reality of human mortality for the first time. His quest for immortality takes him to the edges of the known world, where he meets Utnapishtim, survivor of the Great Flood that nearly destroyed humanity. The epic ends not with triumph over death, but with acceptance of mortality and a return to Uruk, where Gilgamesh finally becomes the king his people need. The message was clear to ancient audiences. Even heroes must learn to accept their human limitations. The Age of Heroes transformed Sumerian civilization. City-states grew larger and more complex, requiring new forms of administration. The first true palaces appeared alongside temples as centers of power. International trade expanded, bringing luxury goods from as far away as modern Afghanistan and India. Most importantly, this period saw the emergence of historical consciousness. Rulers began to record their deeds for posterity, giving us our first written history. As the 3rd millennium BCE approached its midpoint, the stage was set for even greater changes. The isolated city-states of Sumer would soon face a new challenge, the rise of the world's first empire. The Age of Heroes was ending, but its stories, preserved in clay and stone, would inspire humanity's imagination for thousands of years to come. The Bronze Age Revolution, transforming Sumerian civilization, 2900 to 2350 BCE. The secret arrived in Sumer on the back of a donkey caravan, hidden among bundles of tin from the distant mountains of Iran. When mixed with copper in precisely the right proportions, this dull grey metal produced something magical, an alloy harder than stone, easily cast into complex shapes, and capable of holding an edge sharp enough to change the world. Bronze had arrived, and with it came power to remake civilization. The impact was immediate and revolutionary. Bronze weapons cut through the leather armor and copper weapons of previous generations like a hot knife through butter. The armies of cities that mastered bronze production became nearly invincible on the battlefield. At the site of ancient Ur, archaeologists found the remains of a bronze foundry that operated with industrial efficiency, the world's first military-industrial complex. The secret of bronze became so valuable that rulers encoded the exact proportions of copper and tin in cuneiform tablets, marked "eyes only" for the royal metallurgists. But bronze was more than a military technology. In the hands of Sumerian craftsmen, it became an art form. The bronze head of an Akkadian ruler found at Nineveh shows us the height of their artistic achievement. Every curl of the beard, every fold in the royal headband captured in stunning detail. This was propaganda cast in metal, showing subjects and enemies alike the power and majesty of their rulers. The demand for copper and tin to make bronze created the world's first international trade networks. Merchants from Ur and Uruk ventured far beyond the two rivers, establishing trading colonies in distant lands. Clay tablets from this period give us detailed accounts of these ventures, cargo manifests, partnership agreements, and letters of credit that would look familiar to any modern businessman. One tablet records a merchant's complaint about copper quality to a supplier in Oman, proof that customer service issues are as old as commerce itself. The wealth generated by this trade transformed Sumerian society. A new merchant class arose, challenging the traditional power of temples and palaces. Private enterprise flourished. We have contracts for everything from real estate deals to marriage agreements. One tablet records a female tavern keeper's successful lawsuit against a deadbeat customer, showing that women could own businesses and seek justice in Sumerian courts. Professional armies emerged to protect this wealth and the trade routes that generated it. Gone were the days of part-time soldier farmers. The new armies were equipped with standardized bronze weapons and trained in sophisticated tactics. The Standard of Ur, a magnificent wooden box decorated with shell and lapis lazuli inlays, shows us these professional soldiers in action. Heavy infantry with spears and helmets, four-wheeled battle wagons pulled by onagers, wild asses, and officers directing operations from the rear. Urban life reached new levels of sophistication. The street grid of Ur, laid out around 2500 BCE, would not look out of place in a modern city. Multi-story houses lined paved streets complete with indoor plumbing and waste disposal systems. Schools trained scribes in the increasingly complex art of cuneiform writing. One schoolboy's tablet has survived, covered with mathematical exercises and a complaint about strict teachers that could have been written yesterday. Religious life became more complex as well. The Great Ziggurat of Ur, built around 2100 BCE, rose in stages nearly 100 feet into the sky. These massive structures required advanced mathematical knowledge to design and immense organizational capacity to build. The Ziggurats were more than just temples. They were artificial mountains that connected heaven and earth, visible symbols of Sumerian cities' power and wealth. But this golden age contained the seeds of its own destruction. The intensive irrigation that supported Sumerian agriculture was slowly poisoning the soil with salt. Bronze weapons and tactics were spreading beyond Sumer's borders to potential enemies. And the wealth gap between elite and commoner was growing dangerously wide. As the century turned, a new power was rising in the north, the Akkadians, led by a charismatic ruler named Sargon. The age of independent city-states was about to end, and the world's first empire was about to begin. The rise and legacy of the Akkadian Empire. Legend tells us he was born in secret, placed in a reed basket and set adrift on the Euphrates, a story that would echo through the millennia, from Moses to Romulus and Remus. The truth about Sargon of Akkad's origins may never be known, but the empire he built would change the world forever. Starting as a cupbearer to the king of Kish, he rose through cunning and military genius to forge the world's first multi-ethnic, multilingual empire. The Akkadian Empire burst onto the world stage with stunning speed. In a series of lightning campaigns, Sargon's armies swept from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. The Siege of Uruk, recorded in both poetry and clay tablets, broke the power of the ancient Sumerian cities. One by one, the formerly independent city-states fell to his professional army, armed with standardized bronze weapons and trained in revolutionary tactics. A clay tablet from Nippur captures the shock of this new kind of warfare. The walls were breached as if they were mere clay pots. But Sargon's true genius lay not in conquest, but in administration. He was the first ruler to create a professional bureaucracy capable of governing a vast territory. His innovation: a standardized system of weights and measures, a unified legal code, and most importantly, the world's first standardized postal system. Royal messengers carried orders and reports across the empire with unprecedented speed, allowing Sargon to respond to threats and opportunities faster than any ruler before him. The Akkadian capital city of Agay rose from nothing to become the largest and most cosmopolitan city in the world. Its location remains unknown to archaeologists, adding to its mystique. Contemporary texts describe it as a marvel of urban planning, with broad avenues, public gardens, and a palace complex that would influence royal architecture for generations. The city became a melting pot where Akkadian and Sumerian cultures blended to create something entirely new. Sargon's daughter, Enheduanna, became the world's first known author to sign her name to her works. As high priestess of the moon god Nana at Ur, she wrote hymns and poems that merged Akkadian and Sumerian religious traditions. Her poem, The Exaltation of Inanna, remains one of the most powerful pieces of literature from the ancient world, a masterwork that would influence religious poetry for thousands of years. The empire's reach extended far beyond Mesopotamia. Akkadian merchants traded with the Indus Valley civilization, while diplomatic treaties were signed with rulers as far away as modern Turkey. Archaeological evidence shows Akkadian influence in everything from pottery styles to architectural techniques. A remarkable bronze head of an Akkadian ruler, possibly Sargon's grandson Naram-Sin, shows us the face of empire, confident, stern, and unmistakably powerful. But holding such a vast territory together required more than military might. Sargon pioneered the use of propaganda on an imperial scale. Royal inscriptions in both Akkadian and Sumerian proclaimed his divine right to rule the 4 quarters of the world. His scribes developed new literary forms to glorify royal power, including the world's first victory monuments that combined text and image to tell a story of triumph. Naram-Sin took his grandfather's innovations even further. In his famous victory stele, he had himself depicted wearing the horned crown of divinity, the first Mesopotamian ruler to claim actual godhood rather than just divine favor. The stele shows him ascending a mountain over the bodies of his enemies, while his soldiers follow in precise formation. It's both a masterpiece of propaganda art and a window into the empire's growing hubris. The Akkadian Empire would last for 2 centuries, transforming the ancient world in ways that would echo through history. They standardized the cuneiform script, making it adaptable to multiple languages. Their military innovations would influence warfare for millennia. Their administrative systems became the template for all future empires. Even their art, with its emphasis on royal power and divine right to rule, would influence how rulers portrayed themselves for thousands of years to come. Yet at the height of their power, cracks were beginning to show. The empire's very success had created new problems. Maintaining armies on multiple frontiers strained the treasury. Agricultural lands were showing signs of salt buildup from intensive irrigation. Climate change brought prolonged droughts. And on the empire's edges, hungry nomadic tribes watched and waited. The mighty empire of the Four Quarters was about to face its greatest test, one that would reshape the ancient world once again. The Golden Age of Sumer, 2100 to 2000 BCE. The restoration began with a dream. According to ancient texts, Ur-Nammu, governor of Ur, saw a vision of the moon god Nana offering him kingship over Sumer and Akkad. Whether divine inspiration or political calculation, his subsequent rise to power ushered in a century that would represent the pinnacle of Sumerian civilization, a brilliant sunset before the long night of decline. Ur-Nammu's first act set the tone for his reign. In the world's first known legal code, carved in cuneiform on clay tablets, he established principles of justice that would echo through history. Standardized weights and measures to prevent fraud, protection for widows and orphans, and fixed penalties for specific crimes. The orphan was not delivered up to the rich man, the widow was not delivered up to the mighty man, the code proclaimed. Most revolutionary was its system of monetary compensation for injuries, replacing the older tradition of literal eye for an eye justice with financial settlements. Under Ur-Nammu's son Shulgi, the arts of administration reached new heights of sophistication. The king himself set an example of superhuman energy. In one famous inscription, he boasts of running from Ur to Nippur and back in a single day, a distance of over 100 miles, to participate in religious festivals in both cities. More than mere athletic prowess, this feat demonstrated his personal supervision of the empire's roads and messaging system. The bureaucracy of Ur III, as historians call this period, was a marvel of efficiency. Every lamb born, every jar of beer brewed, every bundle of reeds cut was recorded in triplicate on clay tablets. Archaeologists have recovered hundreds of thousands of these administrative texts, revealing an economic system of staggering complexity. One tablet records the delivery of 685,000 fish to the Temple of Nippur, evidence of industrial-scale food production. Another lists the daily beer rations for workers building a new canal, showing how the state used commodities as currency. Architecture reached its zenith during this period. The Great Ziggurat of Ur, whose ruins still dominate the Iraqi landscape today, rose in 3 massive stages to a height of 100 feet. Its construction required millions of mud bricks, each stamped with the king's name. The outer surface was wrapped in fired bricks set in bitumen, creating a waterproof shell that preserved the structure for 4,000 years. At its summit stood a temple where priests conducted elaborate rituals, believing they served the gods in their earthly dwelling. Shulgi transformed education into a true system of higher learning. The tablet house, Dub-Ba, became the world's first university, where students mastered not only writing and accounting, but literature, mathematics, and music. We have their homework assignments, multiplication tables, geometric calculations, and copies of epic poems. One student's tablet preserves a humorous dialogue between 2 scribal students, one boasting of his abilities while the other deflates his pretensions. The arts flourished in this atmosphere of peace and prosperity. The Lady of Warka, a marble sculpture discovered at Uruk, shows us the height of Sumerian artistic achievement, delicate carving capturing every fold of the subject's draped garment, though her head, sadly, has been lost to time. Musicians performed complex compositions on lyres and harps, their melodies preserved in cuneiform tablature that musicologists are still working to decode. International trade reached unprecedented levels. Merchant ships from Ur traded with ports in the Indus Valley, bringing back carnelian beads and printed cotton textiles. caravans crossed the Syrian desert to reach Mediterranean ports, carrying wool textiles and finished bronze goods to exchange for cedar wood, silver, and gold. The wealth poured into Ur, funding ever more ambitious building projects and artistic works. But beneath this golden surface, problems were brewing. The intensification of agriculture was leading to dangerous levels of soil salination. Climate change was bringing longer dry seasons and less predictable river floods. The complex bureaucracy, while efficient, consumed an ever larger share of the empire's resources. And on the empire's periphery, Amorite nomads were beginning to press against the borders in ever larger numbers. Most dangerous of all was the very success of the system itself. The centralization of power in Ur had created a society utterly dependent on the state. When that state finally began to crack under multiple pressures, the entire civilization would prove catastrophically vulnerable. The golden age of Sumer was approaching its end, though none who lived through its glory could have imagined how complete the collapse would be. The rise, fall, and legacy of the Sumerian civilization. The end began with salt. For 2,000 years, Sumerian farmers had channeled river water through their fields, unaware that each irrigation cycle left behind a microscopic layer of salt. By 2000 BCE, the accumulated minerals had turned vast tracts of once fertile land into sterile white wasteland. A desperate letter from this period tells the tale. The earth turned white as the fertility departed from the soil. No plant broke through the earth, no grain sprouted. Nature itself seemed to turn against the world's first civilization. Climate records preserved in lakebed sediments reveal a catastrophic drought that lasted for centuries. The Tigris and Euphrates ran low, their life-giving floods becoming erratic and unpredictable. Temple records show grain prices soaring to unprecedented levels as harvests failed year after year. A civilization built on agricultural surplus found itself facing something unthinkable: widespread hunger. Into this weakened realm swept the Amorites, semi-nomadic Western Semites whom the Sumerians had long derided as uncivilized Westerners who know not grain. Led by ambitious chieftains and armed with new bronze weapons, they pressed into Mesopotamia not as a single conquering army, but as a relentless migration that transformed the region's demographic makeup. Clay tablets record increasingly desperate attempts to fortify cities against these newcomers, who seemed to flow around walls like water. The fatal blow came in 1750 BCE, when Elamite armies from the Iranian plateau sacked Ur. The destruction layer tells a stark tale: buildings burned, treasures looted, temples desecrated. A Sumerian poet left us a haunting lament: the city is given over to tears, the sacred songs have ceased. In the streets where feasting crowds would gather, scattered bones lay aging in the sun. Yet, even as their political power crumbled, Sumerian culture achieved a kind of immortality through its conquerors. The Amorite rulers who established new kingdoms, most notably Hammurabi of Babylon, adopted Sumerian customs, religious practices, and literary traditions. Scribes in Babylon and Assyria continued copying Sumerian texts for another 1,000 years, preserving the world's first literature for posterity. The Epic of Gilgamesh found new life in Akkadian translation, spreading throughout the ancient Near East to influence later literary traditions. Sumerian mathematics, with its sophisticated understanding of geometry and algebra, became the foundation for all subsequent Middle Eastern mathematical traditions. Their system of law codes, beginning with Ur-Nammu's innovations, influenced legal thinking from Hammurabi to Justinian. Archaeological evidence shows that many Sumerian technological innovations survive their creators. Their irrigation techniques spread across the ancient world. Their pottery wheels revolutionized craft production from Egypt to India, and their architectural innovations influenced building practices for millennia. The basic plan of their temples, a raised platform with a shrine at the top, would be repeated in structures from Babylonian ziggurats to Mesoamerican pyramids. Today, the ruins of Ur lie in the Iraqi desert, the Great Ziggurat still rising above the plain like a mountain sculpted by human hands. Nearby, American soldiers during the Iraq War filled sandbags with earth that glittered with fragments of ancient pottery debris from the world's first civilization. The land between the rivers has seen empires rise and fall in the millennia since Sumer's decline, but none have fully erased the mark of those first city builders. Perhaps Sumer's greatest legacy was the very idea of civilization itself, the notion that humans could build cities, create writing systems, develop complex technologies, and organize societies on a massive scale. They showed humanity what was possible, even if their reach sometimes exceeded their grasp. Their achievements and their failures continue to resonate in our own time as we face similar challenges of climate change, environmental degradation, and social complexity. In the end, Sumer's story is our story, a tale of human ingenuity and ambition, of remarkable achievements and cautionary failures. They were the first to build civilization, and in doing so, they encountered all the promises and perils that complex society brings. Their walls have crumbled, their songs have fallen silent, but their legacy lives on in every city we build, every law we write, and every story we tell about humanity's endless quest to create something larger than ourselves. The legacy of Sumer, humanity's first great civilization. When British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley first broke ground at Ur in 1922, he could scarcely have imagined what lay beneath his feet. As his workers' picks struck the first mud bricks, they were reaching across 4,000 years to touch the remains of humanity's first great urban experiment. What they found would revolutionize our understanding of human history. Buried beneath the Iraqi desert lay gold treasures that rivaled Tutankhamun's royal tombs that rewrote the history of early kingship, and hundreds of thousands of clay tablets that gave voice to long-silent peoples. The discovery of the royal cemetery of Ur sent shockwaves through the academic world. Queen Pwabi's headdress of gold leaves and lapis lazuli beads, now restored and gleaming in the British Museum, proved that sophisticated artistic traditions existed 1,000 years before the pyramids of Egypt. But perhaps the most remarkable discoveries were the most mundane clay tablets recording school lessons, business contracts, love letters, and tavern receipts. These everyday documents revealed a society startlingly similar to our own. They showed us parents worried about their children's education, merchants complaining about copper quality, priests managing temple estates, and scribes copying literature for posterity. One tablet preserves a letter from a mother to her son away at school, urging him to study hard and avoid bad company advice that could have been written yesterday. The rediscovery of Sumer transformed our understanding of human potential. Before these excavations, scholars believed civilization had begun with Greece and Rome. Now we know that urban life, writing, mathematics, literature, and organized government all existed thousands of years earlier. The Sumerians were not primitive ancestors, but sophisticated innovators who grappled with many of the same challenges we face today. Their solutions to these challenges continue to influence us. Their invention of writing, beginning with simple accounting marks and evolving into a sophisticated system capable of recording everything from astronomical observations to poetry, created the foundation for all subsequent written communication. Their mathematical innovations, particularly in geometry and algebra, still undergird modern science and engineering. Their legal codes, beginning with Ur-Nammu's reforms, established principles of justice that echo through legal systems today. Modern Iraq has begun to reclaim this magnificent heritage. The ancient sites are being restored and protected, despite the challenges of war and political instability. Iraqi archaeologists are leading new excavations, using modern technology to unlock more secrets from the desert soil. At Ur, the Great Ziggurat has been partially restored, its massive bulk once again dominating the landscape as it did 4,000 years ago. Perhaps most remarkably, Sumerian innovations continue to shape our world in unexpected ways. Their sexagesimal number system, based on units of 60, still governs how we measure time and angles. Their observations of celestial phenomena influenced astronomy for millennia. Their literary themes, the quest for immortality in Gilgamesh, the flood story that would later appear in Genesis, the tension between civilization and nature, remain powerful in modern culture. Yet their greatest legacy may be the very concept of urban civilization itself. The Sumerians were the first to discover that humans could live together in large numbers, organize complex societies, develop sophisticated technologies, and create art that outlived its creators. They showed us both the possibilities and the pitfalls of civilization, the heights humanity could reach, and the catastrophic failures we must avoid. As we face our own challenges of climate change, environmental degradation, and social complexity, the Sumerian experience offers both hope and warning. They proved that humanity could solve seemingly insurmountable problems through innovation and cooperation. But they also showed how success could breed hubris, and how environmental neglect could undermine even the mightiest civilization. Their cities have crumbled to dust, their gods are no longer worshipped, and their language died out 2,000 years ago. Yet in every city we build, every law we write, and every story we tell about humanity's endless quest to create something larger than ourselves, the spirit of Sumer lives on. They were the first to dream the dream of civilization, and we are still living in the world they imagined.